Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome back to Mountain Home Stories. I'm so happy to have you here with me today in my cozy corner of the world. Our community poll is officially closed, and I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who voted. The choice is beautifully made, and today we are turning the very first page of a historical milestone, Rajmohan's Wife by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Published all the way back to 1864, this holds a special place in history as the very first Indian novel ever written in English. It is a tale filled with rich atmosphere, deep mystery, and a remarkably brave heroine named Matangini. Whether you are here to relax and unwind, or lose yourself in a classic tale, or practice your English language skills, I hope this space brings you comfort. So pull up your favorite chair, settle in, and let us turn back to the pages of time together. Bengal's first great novelist, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, actually started his writing career in English. In 1864, when he was just 25 years old, he published his very first novel called Rajmohan's Wife. It was printed chapter by chapter in a weekly magazine called The Indian Field. Over time, copies of that magazine became impossible to find. People completely forgot that Bankim Chandra had written a full novel in English. Even his own nephew and biographer, Mr. Satish Chandra Chattopadhyay, wrote in a book about Bankim Chandra's life that his English novel was never finished. But a lucky mistake saves the story. So what was the mistake? Years later, a researcher named Brajendranath Banerjee was looking through old copies of a different newspaper called the Hindu Patriot. By pure luck, a bookbinder long ago had accidentally bound the old Indian Field magazines into the same volume. That is, they were supposed to keep the two newspapers separate, but they accidentally bound them together in the same cover. If that bookbinder had done their job perfectly, those loose issues of Indian Field would have likely been thrown away or lost over the last century, and the first Indian novel in English would have vanished forever. So because of this workplace mistake, the researcher found the entire novel, except for the first 3 chapters, preserved safely inside the wrong book until discovered decades later. And to fix the missing beginning, that is the first 3 chapters, the researcher used a clever trick involving Bankim Chandra and his nephew again. Let's get to know how everything got into place. Later in life, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay had started translating his own English novel into the Bengali language, but he stopped after 7 chapters. His nephew, Satish Chandra Chatterjee, found this Bengali fragment, and Satish Chandra did not realize that it was actually a translation of the lost English novel. Thinking it was a brand new story, Satish Chandra Chatterjee finished writing it in Bengali and published it under the name of Vadi Vahini. The researcher took the first 3 chapters of that Bengali book and translated them back to English. Thanks to this teamwork across time, that the book is now complete and readable today. Let us begin with chapter 1, The Drawers of Water. There is a small village on the river Madhumati. On account of its being the residence of wealthy zamindars, it is regarded as a village of importance. One Chaitra afternoon, the summer heat was gradually abating with the weakening of the once keen rays of the sun. A gentle breeze was blowing. It began to dry the perspiring brow of the peasant in the field and play with the moist locks of village women just risen from their siesta. It was after such a siesta that a woman of about 30 was engaged in a toilet in a humble thatched cottage. She took very little time to finish the process, usually so elaborate with womankind. A dish of water, a tin-framed looking glass 3 inches wide, and a comb matching it sufficed for the task. Then a little vermilion adorned her forehead. Last of all, some betel leaves dyed her lips. Thus armed, a formidable champion of the world-conquering sex set out with a pitcher in her arm and pushing open the wattled gate of a neighboring house entered within it. There were 4 huts in the house which she entered. They had mud floors and bamboo walls. There was no sign of poverty anywhere. Everything was neat and tidy. The 4 huts stood on the 4 sides of a quadrangle. Of these, 3 had entrances opening on the yard, the 4th opened outwards. This last was the reception room, while the others, screened on all sides, constituted the zenana. Some brinjals and salads were growing on the carefully tilled plot of land in front of the raised terrace before the outer room. The whole was enclosed by a reed fence with a bamboo gate, so the woman could easily make her way into the house. It is superfluous to add that she went straight towards the zenana. I know not where the other inmates of the house had gone after their siesta, but at that time there were only 2 persons there. One, a young woman of 18 bent over her embroidery, and a child of 4 immersed in play. The elder brother had wilfully left his ink pot behind when going to school. The child's eyes had fallen on it, and he was joyfully smearing his face with the ink. He seemed to be afraid of his brother coming back and snatching the ink pot away, so he was emptying the pot. The newcomer sat down on the floor by the side of her who was working and asked, "What are you doing?" The other laughed and said, "Oh, it's Didi. What kindness! Whose face was it that I first saw on getting up this morning?" The guest laughed back and retorted, "Who else but the person you see every morning?" At this, the face of the younger woman clouded over for a moment. While the smile half lingered on the lips of the other, let us describe them both at this place. It has already been mentioned that the visitor was 30 years of age. She was neither dark nor exactly olive. Her face was not quite pretty, yet there was no feature which displeased the eye. She had a sort of restless charm, and her smiling eyes heightened the effect of it. The ornaments on her person were not large in number, but constituted a fair load for a porter. The conch shell worker who had made her shell bracelet was no doubt a descendant of Vishwakarma himself. The woman adorned with these ornaments had only a coarse sari on a plump figure. There was evidently no love lost between the sari and the washerman, for it had not visited the laundry for a long time. The dainty limbs of the woman of 18 were not burdened with such abundance of ornaments, nor did her speech betray any trace of the East Bengal accent, which clearly showed that this perfect flower of beauty was no daughter of the banks of the Madhumati, but was born and brought up on the Bhagirathi in some place near the capital. Some sorrow or deep anxiety had dimmed the lustre of her fair complexion. Yet her bloom was as full of charm as that of the land lotus, half scorched and half radiant under the noonday sun. Her long locks were tied up in a careless knot on her shoulder, but some loose tresses had thrown away the bondage and were straying over her forehead and cheeks. Her faultlessly drawn arched eyebrows were quivering with bashfulness under a full and wide forehead. The eyes were often only half seen under their drooping lids, but when they were raised for a glance, lightning seemed to play in a summer cloud. Yet, even those keen glances charged with the fire of youth betrayed anxiety. The small lips indicated the sorrow nursed in her heart. The beauty of her figure and limbs had been greatly spoilt by her physical or mental suffering. Yet no sculptor had ever created anything nearly as perfect as the form half revealed by the neat sari she wore. The well-shaped limbs were almost entirely bare of ornaments. There were only churis on the wrists and a small amulet on her arm. These too were elegant in shape. The younger woman put away her needlework and began to talk with the visitor. The latter displayed great eloquence in describing her domestic tribulations, most of which, unfortunately, were imaginary. She put the fringe of her mud-stained sari again and again to her eyes, which were not in a condition to call for it. But in certain eventualities, even the salagram, God dies. As often as the end of the sari touched her eyes, they shed copious tears. After many such showers, she was preparing for a full-dress outburst when her eyes suddenly fell on the ink-smeared face of the child who had emptied the ink pot and was standing with a darkened countenance. The bizarre sight converted the tears of the narrator of household misery into laughter. Humor swept away pathos. When the ceremony of tears ended at last, The sun was really sinking down to rest. At this, the speaker invited the young woman to come with her to fetch water. She had in fact come there with a view to making that invitation. The younger woman refused, and when her companion began to press her, said, "There are crocodiles in the Madhumati. They will drag me away." Her companion laughed out loudly at this, which showed her that her objection was not admitted. Yet she added, "You should go now, Konuk. It's growing late." Konuk pointed to the sun, which was still above the trees, and said, "It's still noon." At this the younger woman became grave and said, "You know, Konuk Didi, I never fetch water." "That is why I am asking you to," replied Konuk. "Why should you remain in a cage all the day? Do not all other housewives draw water?" The younger woman said disdainfully, "That's a work for servant girls." "Why? Who fetches water for you? Where are your servants?" "Well, Thakurji fetches our water." "If the daughter can do servant's work, cannot the daughter-in-law?" The young woman said firmly, "I cannot argue about it, Konuk. You know my husband has forbidden me to fetch water, and you know him well." Konuk Mai did not reply offhand. She quickly glanced round to see if anyone was coming. When she saw there was no one about, she stood with her eyes fixed on the face of her companion as if wanting to say something. But she repressed the impulse from fear and remained musing with downcast eyes. The younger girl said, "What are you thinking about?" "If only you had eyes," replied Konuk. The younger woman would not, however, listen to her. She made a sign to Konuk to stop and said, "Hush, hush, I understand your meaning." "If you have done so, what are you going to do now?" asked Konuk. The younger girl remained silent for a while. Her quivering lips and reddening brow betrayed the preoccupation of her mind. A slight tremor in her limbs also showed how agitated she was. After some time she said, "Let us go. But is it wrong?" Konuk laughed and replied, "Wrong? I am not a fat-bellied Bhattacharya. I have nothing to do with the Shastras. But I would have gone even if I had 50 men." "Oh, what bravery!" replied the other, laughing, as she went out to get her pitcher. 50? Do you really wish for as many?" Konuk smiled sadly and said, "It's a sin even to say so. But if all the 50 were of the same sort as the one given me by fate, it would hardly matter. If I meet none, I am a chaste and devoted wife, even if married to 1,000,000 of men." "The Kulin girl's lot!" exclaimed the other, and quickly got a tiny pitcher from the kitchen. The pitcher perfectly matched the carrier of water. Then they both marched off towards the river. Konuk laughed and said, "Come now, my proud girl, let's go and show beauty's splendor to the gaping idiots." "Hang you, monkey!" cried the other, and hid a blushing face in her veil. Chapter 2. The Two Cousins. The rays of the setting sun had vanished from the tops of the coconut palms, but night had not yet descended on the earth. It was at this time that Konuk and her companion were returning home, each with a pitcher in her arm. By the roadside was a small garden, of a type rare in East Bengal. Numerous roses and mollika buds were caressing the eyes of the passerby from within the compound, surrounded by a handsome iron fence. Walks covered with red brick dust had been laid down beside the old-style square and oval beds. There was a tank in the middle of the gardens, whose banks were covered with soft turf. On one side was a row of brick-paved steps. Facing the steps was a reception room, in the front veranda of which 2 men were engaged in talk. The older of the 2 would be above 30. He was a tall and stout man. It was because he was too stout that he could not be said to possess a good figure. His complexion was dull and dark. There was no feature on his face which could give him the least claim to handsomeness. On the contrary, he had something positively unattractive about him. In fact, he was not a common face. At the same time, it was difficult to define its peculiarity offhand. He had a dhoti of Dhaka manufacture on, a long and twisted dhaka chadar, which tied round his head in the shape of turban, which hid even the few wisps of hair that still remained there. His dark and corpulent body could be fully seen through the shirt of dhaka muslin he was wearing, and with it his gold amulet which peeped out off and on. But the thick gold chain which adorned his neck had actually intruded outside his shirt. The shirt had gold studs fastened with a gold chain. All the fingers had rings, and there was a huge bludgeon of peach in his hand. The 2 small feet were enclosed in English shoes. The man's companion was a remarkably handsome young man of about 22. His clear, placid complexion had turned a little dull either through want of exercise or too much comfort. His clothes were good, but not very costly. A dhoti, a fine chadar, a cambric shirt, and English shoes. There was a single ring on one finger and no amulet or necklace. The elder man addressed the other. "Well, Madhav, you have turned to Calcutta again. Why this infatuation?" "Infatuation?" replied Madhav. "If my liking for Calcutta be an infatuation, why shouldn't yours for Radhaganj be called by the same name?" Mothur answered, "Why?" Madhav, "Why not? You have spent your life in the shade of the mango gardens of Radhaganj. You love Radhaganj. I have spent my life in the stench of Calcutta. I love Calcutta." Mothur, "Stench only. The filth of the trains, with rotten rats and cats thrown in, surely a feast for the gods." Madhav smiled and said, "It is not for these that I go to Calcutta. I have business too." Mothur, "Business indeed. New horses, new carriages, visiting all the sharks of the town, throwing away money, burning the oil, drinks for anglicized friends and pleasures. What are you staring at that way? Have you never seen Connaught? Or has the girl with her just dropped from the sky?" "Ah, yes. Who is it with her?" Madhav flushed, but immediately changed the subject and said, "What a girl Connaught is! She can laugh with so much sorrow eating in her heart." Mothur, "Yes, but who is it she's got with her?" Madhav, "How can I say? I cannot see through clothes. You say she is veiled." It was in fact Connaught and her companion who were returning with their pitchers. Everybody knew Connaught, but such indescribable beauty radiated from every movement of the other woman that it charmed the eyes first of Madhav and then of Mothur. Their looks remained fixed on her, and they were as fascinated by the sight as a deer is by the sound of the flute. When the words last recorded came out of the mouth of Madhav, a sudden gust of wind passed over the heads of the women. The younger woman was then adjusting the pitcher in arms, still unused to carrying water, and she had brought down her hand from the veil. The wind blew it away and revealed the face. Madhav raised his brows in surprise. Mothur said, "There, you know her?" "Yes." "You know her and I do not. I have spent my life here and you are only a newcomer. Well, if you know her, who is she?" "My sister-in-law." "Your sister-in-law, Rajmohan's wife?" "Yes." "Rajmohan's wife, and I have not seen her?" "How can you? She never leaves her house." "Why then has she today?" "I don't know." "What sort of a woman is she?" "You have seen her. Very handsome." "Oh, a thought reader indeed. I'm not asking that. Is she a good woman?" "What do you mean by a good woman?" Mothur, "Oh, the college has done for you. It's impossible to talk with people who have once gone there and recited the jargon of the red-faced sahibs. What I mean is, has she—" The stern frown of Madhav cut short the coarse speech forming on Mathur's lips. Madhav said haughtily, "You need not be so outspoken. You have no business to prattle about a respectable woman passing along the road." Mothur replied, "Did I not say that a smattering of English converts our brethren into fiery sahibs? Well,
If one is not to discuss one's sister-in-law, whom is one to discuss? His grandmother? Anyway, let it pass. Relax your scowling face, or the crows would begin to peck at it. What luck! That clown Rajmohan to have a wife like this.
Marriage is called a lottery, said Madhub. And after a few more words, the two parted company. Chapter 3. The Truants return home. Konakmoi and her companions silently pursued their way home. The latter was feeling extremely shy before men, and at her silence, Konok also had to remain silent. Konok, however, felt the missed opportunity of wagging her tongue very keenly. The pathway was more lonely near their homes, and the younger woman began. How the wretched wind hustled me! Why, replied Konok laughingly, has your brother-in-law never seen you before? I'm not thinking of him, but there was another man with him. He is Mothur Babu. Have you never seen him? No, indeed. Is he Mothur Babu, the cousin of my sister's husband? Yes, who else? What a shame! Please don't talk about it to anybody. Oh no, I'm going to tell people that you dropped your veil and showed your face when coming back from the river, said Konok and began to simper. The younger woman said angrily, Go to Jericho. How she goes on! I would never have come with you if I had known. Konok laughed again. Leave your jokes alone. Oh, horror! Durga, save me! Cried out the younger woman as she cast her eyes towards her house and began to tremble. They were at that time quite close to it. Konok saw Rajmohan standing at the door with glaring eyes, the very image of death, and whispered to her companion, There is trouble for you. Let me go in with you. I might be of some help. Rajmohan's wife replied in the same low tone, Oh no, I'm quite used to it. It would probably be worse if you are there. You had better go home. At this, Konok went away. Rajmohan did not speak to his wife when she entered the house. She went to the kitchen to put her pitcher down. He followed her silently there. When she had set it down, he said to her, Wait a moment, and poured out all the water on the dust heap. Rajmohan had an old aunt who used to do his cooking. She scolded Rajmohan for thus wasting the water. Why are you throwing the water away? You don't keep a score of servants to draw water. Shut up, you old hag, cried out Rajmohan and flung away the empty pitcher. Then he turned round to his wife and said in a softer but scathing tone, Well, Queen, where have you been? The woman firmly whispered back, I had gone to fetch water. She was standing like a statue exactly on the spot where her husband had asked her to stop. To fetch water, taunted Rajmohan. But with whose permission did you go out? With nobody's permission. Rajmohan could restrain himself no longer. With nobody's permission? He shouted. Have I not forbidden you 1,000 times? The woman replied in the same even tone. You have. Then, wretched girl, why did you go? The woman proudly replied, I am your wife. Her face reddened and her voice began to be choked. I had gone because I thought there was nothing wrong in it. At this display of boldness, Rajmohan absolutely blazed up. Have I not forbidden you 1,000 times? He shouted, and jumping on his wife, who was standing stock still, gripped her by the wrist, raising his other hand to strike her. The helpless woman seemed to understand nothing. She did not move away one step from her assailant, but only looked at him with such pathetic eyes that his hand remained motionless as if spellbound. After a moment's silence, Rajmohan dropped his wife's hand, but immediately shouted out, I'll kick you to death! Even then, the chidden woman did not reply. Only tears were streaming down her face. At the sight of her silent suffering, the cruel man softened a little. He no longer tried to beat her, but continued his abuse. It is unnecessary to try the patience of my readers by reproducing all of his Billingsgate. The patient woman bore it silently. When, at last, Rajmohan's anger ebbed away, his aunt gathered some courage. She took her nephew's wife by the hand and led her into her room, all the while scolding her nephew. Even that was done circumspectly. But when she saw at last that Rajmohan had almost cooled down, she burst out in her turn and paid the nephew back in his own coin. Rajmohan was then nursing his own grievances. He could not quite appreciate the language of his aunt. At any rate, there was no novelty in it, for he had heard it many times before. So they both parted. The aunt began to console the wife, and Rajmohan went out pondering whom to fall upon and smash up. And that brings us to the end of chapter 3. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today for the preface and chapters 1, 2 and 3 of our new journey. I truly hope you enjoyed this first glimpse into Matangini's world. If you want to stay nestled in our story world and find out what happens next, please do subscribe to the channel and turn on your notification. Don't forget to like and share with fellow bookworms or language learners. Remember, our cozy reading circle gathers right here every Tuesday, Thursday and Sunday at 11 a.m. Indian Standard Time. I've already placed this video into our new dedicated playlist, so you can easily listen to the entire book in chronological order whenever you need to have a peaceful escape. Until next time, stay safe, be kind to yourself, and warm wishes from my mountain home to yours. Bye-bye for now.